So if you can stick around, you're most welcome. With that, I'd also like to introduce a couple of other speakers on exactly this kinds of topics as applied to industry. We've got quite a collection here. So among others, why don't we start with Christian Freytag, who is both Chief Data Officer and Chief Technology Officer for SAP. And he's actually been dealing with many of these data issues. Matter of fact, he's also working on strategy and sustainable enterprise. And he's in charge of data and a lot of the artificial intelligence questions being built on top of data. Something, if I remember correctly, a data point, you correct me if I'm wrong, on that you've convinced 4,000 customers to share their data. That's a pretty remarkable accomplishment, something you can then build and train these systems upon. So that's, we're certainly looking forward to having some of that background in there. James, Director of Global, is Director on Accenture, has been leading the technology efforts on work and artificial intelligence for quite some time. One of the most interesting things here is that he's done a book on humans and machines in the age of artificial intelligence, so excellent person to comment on some of these issues, as well as how it's going to affect industry. He's a contributor, in fact, to 12 different books. Also, one of the most recent forthcoming books is on humans and how they're going to affect technology and transforming work, forthcoming from Harvard Business Review Press. One other fun fact about James, is that although he lives in the Bay Area now, he grew up in the Boston area outside Newton, next to Larry Bird, and you can confirm that, yes, Larry Bird did mow his own lawn on that. So a little extra bit of data point on there. Do we have two more joining us online. Do we have those as well? We have one joining us online. Which of the two online do we have? And I can introduce them. Can we show? Kaifu. Wonderful. Kaifu Zhang is Group Vice President for Artificial Intelligence at Alibaba. So now we can get a really interesting and different perspective on this. Matter of fact, before this, he's also head of operations at Taobao, which is, of course, one of the largest online marketplaces in the world. He used to teach at Carnegie Mellon and do research. Matter of fact, I was using and citing some of his research before he left to become one of these important bigwigs at Alibaba, who's now in charge of these artificial intelligence designs. So he's now head of the AI initiative, and he's been on doing market design, doing multi-sided markets, and applied analytics and how these actually things work. So where we academics talk about it, he's actually making it happen. So he's been on both sides of this and really doing some impressive things. So with that, let me give each party just a few minutes to introduce a few thoughts. Why don't you get us started on just a few thoughts on this, and we'll go around and then open it up for questions for myself and from the audience to see if we can get started on what this all means and how artificial intelligence is going to affect work and our lives.
Should I start? Good to be here today. So I'm very interested in human and machine collaboration. One thing that I've seen over the years researching the topic, of course, is that humans and machines can be better together in the workplace, but business leaders, managers really need a plan to get started with a human and machine collaboration program. We see again and again, going back more than 10 years, that there are a number of ways that businesses can benefit from human and machine collaboration. I don't see those going away as this new era of generative AI comes into the workplace. Companies can speed up work and work processes. They can increase scale, flexibility, really improve decision-making, a topic that's come up today already, and personalize processes in new ways. So, just to make that point concrete and to refer to some historical precedents, if you look at a company like BMW, for example, they've been bringing collaborative robotics and machine vision systems into their assembly processes and have been able to improve productivity through that enhanced flexibility by about 85% in many of their plants. So what's the potential for this new generation of intelligent technology with generative AI? What's the potential there? When we do our analysis, we see that about 40% of work hours now can be impacted across the United States economy in new ways that earlier generations of AI and machine learning couldn't, because we're talking now about not just physical systems and vision, but we're talking about language and reasoning tasks. So there's whole new classes of work that are going to be impacted. I'm looking forward to talking about those today.
Fabulous, thanks. Christian, a couple of comments. What's your thinking on all of this?
Thanks for the invite, great to be here. I'm looking on that one in my role being part of SAP's digital organization, which is basically the IT of our tech company. And therefore, in that role, very heavily looking on how can we infuse intelligence in our business processes. And on the other hand side, also being in my role, the IT for our product engineering organization, so all the colleagues developing our commercial software. So what can we do in order to provide access to data for them in order to infuse intelligence in our products, but also we are learning heavily how Gen AI can help us in building software.
Excellent. I'll hope later to find out more how you convince so many companies to share data, since that's one of the sources of competitive advantage. Kaifu, you want to give us a couple of comments on what's your thinking on the role of artificial intelligence in business and society today, since you're so actively involved at Alibaba. Let us know.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so for the past few months, we've been working really day and night to implementing generative AI throughout our entire operation process. It's been really exciting few months from a business point of view, because I think we are actually seeing so many opportunities that generative AI can help us reduce cost and improve consumer experience, and also speed up lots of the development process within the company. There's been, I mean, like 40% of the work hour can be impacted by the tech, and I think we are at around 5 to 7 at the moment, and we're seeing the number goes to 40 very fast, and we're just picking all these business processes, customer service, design, email marketing, all these things, and we are actually already integrating generative AI in those processes, and the amount of business value that's been created in this process is actually quite impressive. Right? So when we're reducing our labor cost, we are also increasing the diversity of content on our platform, which reduces consumer fatigue, improves conversion, and interestingly, generative AI is also helping us to speed up some of our classic NLP tasks. Right? So it's not necessarily a big language model, but it really makes the R&D process in classic NLP much faster as well. So it's been very exciting from a business point of view. At the same time, so just to say this on a broad level, we are kind of witnessing this arms race within the industry. So it's not just us, but all the other competitors or other platforms we see are really jumping on the bandwagon. Everybody's doing generative AI. And the usual suspects, such as customer service or online content generation, has been already heavily impacted by the technology. So we're actually a little bit worried, I mean, on a societal level, that there might be a prisoner dilemma of some sort going on, right? So for each individual company, it makes sense to adopt the technology. But if everybody does it, we're going to live in a world where most of the content online are generated through artificial intelligence, which is kind of scary. But we're already seeing that to a certain extent. So coming back to some of the earlier comments made by the speakers and also by Professor Benjo earlier, we are kind of seeing this very interesting situation here where individual companies are really speeding up on their adoption because it creates so much economic value. But on a societal level, I'm kind of worried about the prisoner dilemma outcome. Yeah, so that's some quick observations.
So I love that comment. Part of that is so interesting. I'm going to give you the first question on that. I think that's an incredibly important issue. The arms race aspect of it feels inevitable. One company is going to be working with, trying to outcompete another. The nature of competition is such that you're in an arms race. So I'd ask you two versions of that question. What do you think are the attributes of that arms race, and who's likely to win it, or how would you mitigate it?
Yeah. Okay. So I can also I'll answer the question from two different aspects, right? The first one is really about the arms race to develop the best tech, right? The most powerful AI on the planet, and sort of becoming the leader in the tech race. But when it comes to that question, I think the answer is kind of known to many, right? So we have these leading companies who are really leading the pack. We have OpenAI, Anthropics, all these other or some of the usual suspects, right? I don't have to name all the names that are really leading in the technological aspect, and they are probably gonna keep the leading position for some time. But there are also two other contenders in that race, right? The first one is open source, right? So it's actually quite incredible how fast the open source techs are evolving. And actually, when I look at most of the small and medium-sized firms in China and elsewhere, they're really taking all the open source models and sort of fine-tuning those to their specific need. And economic values have been created, even though they are not the leader in the tech themselves. So that's one. That's the first answer to your question. And the second aspect of the arms race is really an arms race to adopt the technology, right? So it's not about trying to develop the best tech, but really trying to adopt the tech to reduce cost and generate business value. And oftentimes you don't need a really large model for that, right? So you take a relatively kind of quote unquote small model, right? You take a certain B model and you fine tune that to your specific need, and you can create millions of dollars of economic value from it, right? So, but the arms race I was kind of like referring to was that if everybody does this, right? So imagine that you are really injecting this AI generated content into the online world, right? So imagine if you're a merchant and you are trying to grab some say attention from grab the user attention from Instagram or from YouTube, right? Or from from Twitter, right? You can it's kind of like the boat army metaphor that Professor Benjo mentioned earlier, right? So you have this strong you feel the strong temptation, right, to generate this content automatically and put it online to attract consumer clicks, right? And that's really it's already happening to a fairly large scale, according to my knowledge. So each individual company has incentive to do that, but if everybody does that, it really lowers the overall content quality level online, and the platforms have to develop governance approaches to govern that problem. And I think that's going to be a problem in the next 6 months to a year.
I think it's going to extend. I think it's going to extend well past the next 6 months and the next year. That's a big one.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, I'm saying it's going to become a problem in the next year, and it's going to continue to be a problem for the years to come. Yeah, so that's another aspect of the arms race.
So I'm going to invite others to speak on the arms race issue as well, but I also want to introduce Hamilton Mann into the conversation, who actually runs a show about exactly that. Hamilton actually joins us. He's the Vice President of Digital Marketing and Transformation at Thales Corporation. He teaches at INSEAD, where he's also a group working on digital transformation. He's written recently on the social impacts of artificial intelligence. And one thing that's kind of fun element of this, he's really been working on questions of democratizing knowledge and how do you work on platforms or information for the digital for good. You can think of it, he's been running a show, Conversations of Mann, interesting elements of this. So Hamilton, why don't you speak up for a moment, let us know a little bit more about yourself and what you're thinking on the artificial intelligence and AI issues in commerce today. You're on mute, I'm afraid. I'm sure it's profound. That looks good. Camera.
Yes, can you hear me?
All set.
Very good, very good. So thank you very much for having me, Marshall, and for the kind introduction. So I think basically when it comes to, let's say, AI, there is a kind of a, let's say, marketing approach also as well that we should take into account in the way we spread the power of AI in our society. I think since the beginning of human history, right, we have always been very good at building products that meet specific needs of certain peoples and thus excluding certain others, right? And we kept learning over and over again to do it as best we could. So undoubtedly, this mindset is in tension, right, with inclusiveness and diversity. And the better we are at designing and offering products and services that will perfectly suit a specific audience that we are purposely targeting on purpose, of course, let's say, on that aspect, and the better we become at our ability to discriminate against other audiences that are not targeted and therefore cast aside on purpose. So the pursuit of avoiding unfair biases, right, inherent in the intelligence systems we develop, because they are inherited from our human thought process, is a humanly unattainable goal, per se, right? So a bias that we eliminate is actually replaced by another, unconsciously or consciously. So when it comes to AI, I think the essential question that we face today, and even more so for the future, is not so much about the biases and let's say, those type of things that we're trying to remove and we cannot, right? As it is about the impact that such new intelligence entities, and even if their intelligence is limited, have and will have on human existence. And this is this understanding of the impact that goes hand in hand with the absolutely important responsibility that falls on every creator of artificially intelligent entities to continuously audit, first, assess, second, control, third, the interactions, but also the alterations that such systems can have in our societies, and that the use of such systems are likely to generate or not continuously optimize the positive effects, because of course there will be positive effects, but mostly, let's say, be conscious about how to reduce the negative ones. So in that aspect, I think it will be also very much interesting to know which portion of the billions of dollars investment in OpenAI, for example, is actually put towards fulfilling this purpose.
So there are going to be some really interesting questions about negative effects. So we'll start with interesting question. Almost everyone in this audience has a job. How is AI going to affect work? Jim, you've written books on this whole subject. Which jobs are safe? Which are not going to be safe? How is artificial intelligence going to affect the nature of work?
I think when we look at the media today, it's really high level, really speculative about how generative AI is going to impact work. I think if you're a business leader, there are really a couple approaches you need to start taking now. One is really decompose the jobs in your workforce or in your team, not at a high level, but decompose it down to the underlying bundle of tasks that are in each job in your workforce. You'll see that every job, as we know, has 10, 20 tasks or so, right? A subset of those tasks will be automated as a result of generative AI. A subset, though, and this is the part the media misses, a subset can be augmented. Another subset probably aren't going to be impacted all that much. Coming to an event like this in person probably isn't going to be impacted that much, where you're learning in real time in a live setting. Moreover, you're going to see when you decompose tasks that new tasks are going to be needed to get value from these systems inside a business process. So that's one approach there.
Let me just jump in and ask on that. So yes, there'll be new tasks. Now the question is, as the new tasks are added, will humans learn those new tasks faster than computers?
They will need to, because often we see, for instance, in customer service settings, we've been running experiments in customer service right now, that in a customer service role, there are 13 discrete tasks. 4 of those can be automated and already are at a lot of companies today. 5 can be augmented. 4 are neutral, but we're actually, in the experiments we're seeing today, there are about 4 or 5 new tasks that are needed, and those are all about overseeing machine outputs, ensuring machine outputs are trustworthy. If there's a product, a price feature that's suggested by the machine, you really need a person to do that, to ensure the safe, trustworthy, transparent functioning of that machine output in customer settings. So you really have to kind of have a divide there with a lot of these new tasks. We're actually seeing that a lot of the new tasks speak precisely to what Yoshio was talking about around responsibility and figuring out ways to manage the machines. And that's exactly what we're seeing. A lot of these new tasks are about managing the machines in a trustworthy way.
So, Christian, you're in charge of these kinds of things for enterprises. Where are the risks in this? How is this going to change business, not just change jobs? What are you seeing among your client bases? Are you going to expand business? Are you going to shrink business? Are you going to reward the large firms, going to reward the small firms?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, as my primary customer base are my internal colleagues, I'm thinking there heavily from an engineering experience perspective, because there we do expect a very high impact on a lot of things these colleagues need to do on a daily basis. So very down to earth when it comes to creating test data, or when it comes to creating automation or the coding process per se. And then I believe a little bit like what you said, it really depends on the job to be done. And there our learning is it's important that you get started. So at least I have no clear opinion or view how that entire thing might look like in 2-3 years, but I'm convinced it will be more disruptive than 25 years back when the internet came. So from my perspective, it's therefore important that we internally equip all our teams and start the journey.
If I can just comment on that, I think it's really important for managers to begin to think about this question of how do I get a clear view, right, of what's actually happening as these systems are rolling out. And the thing that we're seeing that is really effective is doing a small scale experiment inside a team and actually see how these tools are being used. So managers, in a sense, need to become anthropologists or journalists, in a sense, asking how people are using the machines to get.
That's what we do all over the company. So, and it's different if you are working in marketing or sales.
Exactly.
You're working on different problems than in engineering, but it's exactly this learning and experimentation journey.
So one of the things I think could be most useful, for this audience or any audience is actually what are the frameworks for addressing these issues? So one of these you just proposed, I think is an excellent one, is testing. Lots of testing and seeing what you can actually do. Maybe they're platform frameworks. Maybe these are language or operating system frameworks. Kaifu, you've been applying these things and you've been thinking about long term. Where do you see this changing the landscape long term? So you mentioned AI gains to productivity, service, recommendation systems. How is it going to change the nature of industry and competition? How is it going to affect things long term?
Yeah. So, when we think about the long-term impact, and especially the long-term impact on work and the way people actually, and also on job replacement, etc. One of the useful framework here might be to distinguish between two ways that AI can be integrated into the work process, right? So the first one is what we call co-pilot. The second one is autopilot, right? So as of now, you actually see two ways where AI is actually sort of crowding out some of the jobs. The first one is by becoming a really powerful co-pilot to the individuals and make them 10 times as efficient as they used to be, right? So firms don't have to hire as many people, but all they need to do is to retain a few super individuals that do the job as well as a much larger workforce, right? And second one is autopilot, which is outright a replacement. And we actually see both of these trends happening. And on the individual level, it does enhance the productivity of certain individuals, but it kind of replaces the others, right? And what is kind of interesting now is that we see this kind of pattern where one man's co-pilot is another man's autopilot, right? So one typical example is that we have all these marketing campaigns, and in each of the campaign, you have one campaign manager who is responsible for the idea generation and all the creative part of it. And then you have designers, and then you have people who actually write the content for the campaign. And what we see increasingly is that the only person who can keep his job is the campaign manager, right? So who is responsible for the idea, but the image generation and the design part and all the text writing part has been relegated to AIs. So that's one trend that we're observing. So if you think about
So I like the distinction that you make between AI being the pilot versus being the co-pilot. Do you have ways of thinking about when it's appropriate for the AI to be the pilot or when it's appropriate to be the co-pilot?
Yeah. So I think the answer to that question lies in the notion of a task decomposition, right? So I kind of really like the task that I really like the framework that you decompose, say, customer service, you have 9 tasks that can be replaced, 5 of them that can be enhanced. I think it's pretty much true for all the tasks we see there. So it's really a case. It's really a case by case answer. And sometimes you have both components in each of the tasks that in the firm. For example, in customer service, we have both cases, right? So like for some of the tasks that really are complicated, right? You need human interaction. You kind of have to give the consumers close attention to guarantee their satisfaction. AI is more like a co-pilot. Right, so you still have an individual, you have a human being who's interacting with the customer, but you have this co-pilot that is speeding up the kind of like the search or the knowledge base, knowledge retrieval process for the customer rep. Right, so that's like a co-pilot. But for some of the other simpler tasks, that is more functional. Right, it is more about answering the factual questions from customers. You can put an autopilot on it. So it's really a case-by-case analysis.
So I wonder, Uber, for example, uses AI to assign drivers. At one point, I wonder when Uber or firms will be starting to use AI to manage whole divisions. That'll be an interesting trade-off. Well, we've got 2 frameworks already. One is interesting co-pilot versus co-pilot. Another one is this experimentation. Hamilton, you're talking about competition between humans and machines as another framework, complements versus substitutes. Do you have other ways of looking at this problem?
Yeah, I think it goes with the pilot, co-pilot type of framework also as well, because basically this is very much about how to deal with the tension between human and machine, right? I think this question about whether we are in competition between humans and machine is in fact a kind of a multifaceted issue with at least I can frame 4 dimensions into play, right? So the first one is there is a human or machine equation, right, to solve, in a way. And it is about what we establish as a social and societal norms. And so we need to determine what tasks must be performed by human explicitly, because we don't want those tasks to be explicitly managed or, let's say, run by machines. And what tasks are better suited for machines, right? So this is quite very much a key decision to be taken. This will serve as the kind of a foundation for AI regulation that will further protect human rights. And this is one of the most pressing priorities considering the underlying social impact of it, right? So the second dimension is like there is the human and machine equation to be solved in a way, right? Which is the kind of a where we're figuring out that AI can enhance human capabilities, right? So it questions what kind of changes are we willing to accept in our society, right? To unlock the potential that AI could bring to augment those human capabilities. And this is where the promise of transformative innovations resides, which can bring about positive change in many human lives, of course. But as always with technology, the value doesn't come for free, okay? The greater the opportunity offered by technology, the greater the changes required, okay? So this is where we can say that those who fear being rendered useless by AI will not be first surpassed by the machine itself, but by the human and machine equation at some point. And this is the competitive challenges, right, that AI poses at the economic level, and it's happening right now, actually, right? The third point, the third piece, is that there is also a human and machine equation versus the human equation itself, right? And it concerns what we do to bridge the gap between those who can access and use AI versus those we cannot. Okay, and so and this element creates a kind of an algorithmic divide, leading to new inequalities in society. So this is also the geopolitical piece, if I may, dimension of the AI landscape. And this dimension of the AI competition landscape will increasingly become a global imperative for preserving sovereignty, security, world stability, equal opportunities also as well, and overall country development moving forward. So the last but not least dimension of those different equations is the machine-to-machine equation, right? So human is not there, right? But it exists. And it is about defining the limits to the emergence of an advanced machine-to-machine interactions, which could potentially give rise to a new form of life at its core, right? So I think this hidden part of the AI competitive landscape is the most crucial aspect for the future of humanity. And bottom line, the definition of the value we give to human life today is it will be very much determining that of the society in which we will live tomorrow.
So I'm really interested in how this boundary moves over time. If you just simply roll the clock back 3 years, people at this very institution at MIT argued you would race with machines, not race against machines. But if you take the advances in just chess alone, it doesn't necessarily make sense for humans to hold back the machines any longer in the same way that we don't have oxen facilitating tractors anymore. It makes no sense at all. So I don't know how those boundaries move over time. I don't know if anyone wants to speculate on that.
I would speculate on that a bit.
Please, okay.
Well,
I'd like an answer.
Well, I
want you to comment. By the way, I don't want to be the only one asking questions. You're here also, hopefully, to learn. So you're welcome. We have microphones on either side. You're welcome to actually jump up for Slido. I'm fully prepared to pepper them with further questions, but I want to invite you to do so as well. So Jim, please tell us, how is that boundary moving?
I do think that we have seen a shift in the past 6-8 months. And I think when we think about intelligent technology going back to industrial robotics systems, information technology in businesses, we're often thinking in terms of automation. What process tasks can we automate to kind of unlock human potential? But it's always about automation. We're seeing now a shift from kind of an age of automation with respect to intelligent technology to potentially a shift to augmentation, human augmentation, or, as Kaifu said, co-pilots, right? When we've done an analysis recently, we've actually seen that more than half of all the tasks that can be performed now, actually closer to 2/3, can be augmented in the workplace. And that's a major shift with generative AI. And part of that is because we're talking now about language tasks, right? And a lot of the work that we do inside business is language and reasoning types of tasks. And those cannot be simply replaced or codified and then replaced, codified into a system and replaced. So there's really a significant opportunity to augment the way that work is done. And our own data science teams, for example, we're seeing our data scientists who, for years have been all about automating their own tasks and figuring out how to automate other people's tasks. Now they're using generative AI to enhance the way that they're telling stories with data, to augment the way that they're modeling processes and operational systems, to augment the way they're learning much more quickly. So we're seeing really this, I think, a shift right now in terms of the landscape to your question.
So I'm going to throw this open to all of you on this, Christian, Kaifu, others. Is generative AI truly different? And if so, how? What's really different? We've done all kinds of automation. There's nuclear power plants for good or bad. There's telecommunications and computation for good or bad. Is generative AI truly different? And if so, how?
I think so. So if we take a very classical machine learning automation project, which we would have done in the last years, so let's take a classical sample out of the finance area. matching algorithms when you have open items, invoices. So there, a good part of these projects was also to work with the data, label it, massage it a little bit. And if we just take that concrete sample of such a project, I believe that Gen AI is making there simply in the speed, when it comes of the pace of the innovation and the speed to value, a big difference that we can shorten project cycles.
Kaifu, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think we are witnessing a paradigm shift here, and generative AI is different. I actually agree with Jim that this past 6 to 8 months is when this paradigm shift had taken place. I think one of the reasons why it's truly different is that I think language is really unique, right? I think in the past 6 to 8 months, AI has become really good at language, and if you think about language, it's such a generic representation of the world, right? Think about Chomsky's notion that it's like a collective memory, it's our history, it's our sense of community, right? And if something is becoming really good at language, it becomes good at planning, it becomes good at task decomposition, right? So language, the universality of language, I think is what makes this technology truly different from all the previous generations of it.
So I heard a wonderful talk by Yuval Noah Harari on exactly that issue. This is the first technology that actually mastered language. It's one thing for a printing press to print a book. It's entirely for the printing press to write and design the book from scratch. And that's something that hasn't been true before. And that a machine capable of using the operating system for culture, which is language, that's really different. Technology's never been able to do that before. But we're generating, you've said enough controversial things, we're getting questions from the audience. So with that, let me open the floor up, and please, so why don't you ask a question of a specific panelist or all?
Awesome. This is just picking up on the conversation, because I was dying to ask this question, and you were kind of going that direction, Marshall, and that is, where are we in the context of the traveling towards a self-actualized, self-aware AI? Because the entire discussion at this point is kind of dancing around that concept. And I think we've touched on a little bit, like, what does that actually mean when it is able to write a book? How far are we from that? Where are you guys seeing that in the context of AI? Because I think that's where people's fears really kind of come out, is what happens when this thing can make up its own mind, write its own tale, determine its own fate, and what is that fate?
So I'm glad I'm just chair on that question. I don't have to answer that one. I throw that open to any of you, Kaifu, and any of you want to speak on that particularly tough question?
Well,
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Yeah, go on, guys.
So he asked the question, when are they going to become self-aware? The HAL 9000, if you will.
Okay. I'm going. Jim and Christian, do you have a
I'm going to punt on the self-aware question, but I will point out that there is a fundamental distinction that I'm seeing, at least with businesses that are adopting it right now. One is something that Christian mentioned, where we're beginning to bring generative AI into business processes and applying it to automate or augment a task. But those are kind of legacy processes, right? So you're going to see an efficiency gain in that process. There's something else really interesting happening right now at scale more than ever. And that is companies like Alibaba, like Google, Microsoft, are starting to bring or increasing the scale of bringing AI into the development of new AI. So you're starting to get this virtuous cycle, right? Almost a recursive cycle that we hear about. And people say, well, when AI starts getting involved in the production of other AI, it can rapidly increase the speed of production, and the singularity is near, right? So that's, there are two fundamental approaches here. I think the risk of the latter approach that I just mentioned is that humans get kind of thrown out of the loop and AI becomes kind of self-generating. I think the upside potential is that we're bringing AI into the development of other AI that can really deliver innovation and growth for companies. And we really want to protect that trajectory and avoid the downside one.
Okay. We got time for one or two more very quick questions. Please.
Hello. Okay. My question is about leadership. So to James, as you're talking about the evolution of task and who is doing that task, I'm thinking about leadership development. I'm reaching a conclusion, and I want to know your thoughts about it, is the leadership as we know it might not exist anymore. Who are we leading, and how are we going to be leading what we are?
Well,
love your...
I've got a quick response to that, and that is that, you know, robots and AI need humans more than we need them. And I think that's a really fundamental fact. I've never seen a case where a robot can kind of go into an enterprise and implement itself and enact change and transform and reinvent an organization. We need people to really get that sequence going. We need people to run experiments to see what's working and what's not working. We need people to lead with a responsible AI hat. We need people to integrate data across the enterprise and build a coherent data supply chain to fuel those AI systems, and so on. So at every phase of implementation, you need people in the loop. Yeah.
So we're at time. Let me ask each of you, if you had one point you wanted to leave the audience with, one sentence, what would you want to leave them with? I don't know, maybe it's on generating data from 4,000 folks, but what one thing would you want to leave with the audience with?
I can just start. I think
I need to think 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think that the workers that are going to be most at risk of displacement, this is a theme that's come up several times this morning, the workers that are at risk of displacement are going to be the workers that aren't using generative AI over the next 1 to 5 years. And companies really need to double down and invest in reskilling people so that everyone is capable of using generative AI, not just in prompt engineering, but really figuring out how to use it on the job.
Kaifu?
Yeah.
We'll give you more time.
I'm done.
Yeah.
One idea you want to leave the audience?
One idea, okay, no problem. I'll give the audience a thought experiment. So imagine a world where everybody uses AI to generate content. That email exchanges will be between not humans but really robots, right? Or between AIs. Just envision that world, right? So the AI is generating this 1,000-word email, and the other AI is kind of replying that email. So it makes us question the meaning of our word in the first place.
Okay, Hamilton, one idea.
Yeah, one idea maybe it is about what I call the dual-sided artificial intelligence, which let's say touch the point in a way, touch the point about the self-awareness of a kind of an AI. I think this is something to be cautious about, which is about this let's say phenomenon that we can see, kind of remarkable one actually, with a symbiotic relationship between machine and each striving to outperform the others, right? As an example, I mean, we can think about AI voice assistants versus voice authentication, right? Or recommendation systems versus adversarial recommendation systems. And plenty other, let's say, already exist, automated trading algorithm versus market surveillance AI, defense drones and counter drones AI. I mean, the point
that's going to be 2 or 3, so I got to give Christian one time, also a moment as well.
The point here very much that there is a kind of a new form of a competition that, let's say, fits itself when it comes to, let's say, the growing of type of platform that we can see when it comes to AI. And so, of course, the point is that we need to make sure that the human stay and, let's say, remains in the loop.
Okay, thank you. Christian, one idea.
I'm wishing that the community works on that idea. I mean, I recently learned that 2/3 of the world's ice cream is actually touching SAP system. And what if we find a way to bring all these data with Gen AI together to solve some of the problems we are facing on the next years?
That'd be wonderful. All right, again, well, thanks to all of you. Hamilton, Kaifu, James, Christian, it's been spectacular. Thanks.